Lightspeed Spanish podcast number 9 for absolute beginners, and today's theme is SER, ESTAR, the two verbs to be.
¿Qué tal, Gordon?
Fenomenal, fenomenal. ¿Tú?
Sí, también, estupendamente.
Me alegro,
Hey.
me alegro. Okay, so SER, ESTAR. Now, as a beginner, I don't know if you've come across SER and ESTAR. If you have, fantastic. If you haven't, well, now's the time to come across it, because these verbs to be, the verbs to be, are the most important verbs. They're the fundamental verbs of Spanish. So it's time to get an understanding of them, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree?
I agree.
She
Totally.
would. Yeah. Okay. Now, one of the confusing things about this is when you say the verb to be, and if you say to somebody, an English person, for example, can you conjugate the verb to be? You get a bit of a blank moment, because people go, oh, I don't know how you conjugate the verb to be. I don't know. What is it? I don't know what it is. So basically that's I am, you are, he or she is, we are, and they are.
And you los are.
And you are, yeah? You are. So that's the verb to be. Now in Spanish there are two. The first one that we'll look at is ser, S-E-R, okay? And that's the verb to be. So how does that conjugate, Cynthia?
Okay. Yo soy. Tú eres. Él, ella, es. Nosotros somos. Vosotros sois. Ellos son.
Muy bien. Okay.
Gracias.
So that's how the verb ser is broken down. Now we've talked about this before, you know, soy, I am a bottle of soy sauce, yeah? Soy is I am, and that's I am permanent. For the moment, later on you'll learn the rules to this, but if you think about ser in terms of permanent things, for example, and we talked about this when we were looking at jobs and things like that. If you say I'm a teacher, that's a permanent thing. Yeah?
Yes.
So how would that go?
Soy profesora.
Okay. Soy profesora. So I am a teacher. Or I'm Spanish. That would be another permanent thing, wouldn't it?
Soy española.
There you are.
Descriptions.
Descriptions, yeah. If you're talking about, for example, you're describing yourself and you're saying I'm tall, that's really a permanent thing. Unless somebody bashes you over the head with a hammer and makes you smaller, you're going to be tall for your life. It's a permanent thing. How would you say that? I'm tall.
Soy alta.
From altitude. Okay. So you've got...
O, por ejemplo, soy blanca.
Ah, yeah. So I'm white-skinned, yeah.
O soy mujer.
A woman. Which again isn't going to change unless, first of all, white skin, unless you're Michael Jackson. Okay, you had a bit of an issue there. Or if you were going to have a sex change. But apart from that, it's going to be permanent.
Sí.
And that's not going to happen here. So, ser is permanent, okay? Just at the beginning, it's if you use it like in your mind like that. And then we've got estar, which is another to be, but it has a T in. And estar, and the way I do it is to say to people, remember the T? T's for temporary, okay? Estar has a T in for temporary. Why? Because typically, and not in everything, estar is a temporary verb. It talks about, you use it when you're talking about states that you're in. For example, I'm happy. How about that bit?
Estoy feliz.
Feliz.
Should we conjugate the verb first?
Yes, indeed. Keep me right.
Yo estoy. Tú estás. Él, ella está. Nosotros estamos. Vosotros estáis. Ellos están.
Okay. Muy bien, muy bien. So that's your verb. I am, estoy. Estoy, okay? So we've had soy, and now we've got estoy. It has a T in for temporary. So you would use, as I was saying before, you would use it for talking about a state that you're in. I'm happy, which was
Estoy feliz.
I'm unhappy.
Estoy infeliz.
Ah,
O triste.
pobrecita.
Oh.
Okay. These are states, the reason that you use a temporary verb is because you can be happy one moment and then you can be unhappy the next moment. You know, if somebody steps on your toe. So these things change. What are the other things? Oh, for example, I'm ill.
Estoy enfermo o enferma in my case.
Yeah. So I'm ill. It's a temporary thing. Yeah.
A funny one that shouldn't be temporary is estoy, well, you can't say that to you about yourself, but somebody está muerto. Dead.
He's dead.
Dead is temporary.
Temporary. Well, if you believe in the afterlife, then that makes sense, but I suppose it must come from the Catholic influence, yeah?
Probably.
Okay. And also, when you're talking about location, now there's a double-edged sword to this. If I want to say I'm here, I would say
Estoy aquí.
Estoy aquí. Okay, I'm here. Why? I'm using temporary because when I move, I'm not going to be here. It's not a permanent thing. However, one little caveat that you've got to add is that whenever you're talking about location, except for some other things we'll come to later on, events, but typically when you're talking about location, you're going to use estar.
And position.
And position.
Location and position.
Yeah. For example, if you were talking about the church that's in the square, now that church has been there for centuries, but you would still say the church is in the square with estar. How would that be?
La iglesia está en la plaza.
Okay. So that's a one that doesn't really fit into the rule. But if you think about anything to do with placement or location, is always estar.
Except for events.
Which we'll come to later on. I just don't want to give you that to confuse you. That's enough to remember permanent things, temporary things. Temporary, estar with T. Okay?
Also, more things that are temporary for us. Marital status.
Ah.
Estoy casado. Estoy soltero. Estoy separado.
Okay. And what's interesting, some of you may have learned soy casado. Okay? Because in Latin America, lots and lots of the countries there use permanent for marriage. In Spain, temporary.
We tend to use temporary. Estar.
Another thing that you may hear a difference when you talk about being retired. In Spain, they say...
We tend to say estoy jubilado o jubilada.
Yeah. In Latin America, you'll hear them say soy jubilado. Okay. I wouldn't worry too much about things like that. But the basic things, states, how are you feeling, how you are, where you are, temporary. Who you are and what you are, permanent. Yeah? That's typically how it works. So how about having a little try, see how many of these we can squeeze in.
Go on then.
Okay, the classic example is the first question you ask people. ¿Cómo estás? You're asking how are you right now. Okay. ¿Cómo estás, Cynthia?
Estoy muy bien. ¿Y tú cómo estás?
Estoy muy bien también. Gracias.
Gordon, ¿de dónde eres?
Soy de South Shields.
Ah, de South Shields.
¿Y tú? ¿De dónde eres?
Soy de Madrid.
Ah, bien.
Y, Gordon, ¿estás casado?
No, no estoy casado. ¿Y tú? ¿Estás casada?
Sí. No. No, estoy soltera.
Ah, bien. Pero... Ok, bien.
Y Gordon, ¿cómo eres físicamente?
Físicamente soy una persona delgada, alta y soy rubio y de piel blanca. ¿Y tú? ¿Cómo eres de persona?
Físicamente soy alta, más o menos. Soy delgada, bueno, ahora más o menos.
Como una tripa.
Soy morena de pelo
Ujú.
y soy de piel blanca.
Vale. Muy bien. Muy bien. So that's basically how you use it. We're flipping between eres or soy or estoy or estás. Yeah, depending on how we're asking the question and what we're asking it about. Okay, so that was a very brief outline. In the help sheets, there's a lot more information to help you understand this. I hope that was okay for you. And nos vemos in the
Adiós.
next podcast. Adiós.